Above all, this mountain is very important for me because this is where my Guru left his body. This mountain is like a temple, a living shrine. For us, in the yogic tradition, a torrent of divinity, a cascade of grace. The way of the mystic. There is a great curiosity in certain circles about mystical experiences. Many claim to have had extraordinary paranormal experiences which they cite as proof of their spiritual evolution. A common word in people's spiritual lexicons nowadays is samadhi, which is seen as a certificate of mystical attainment. What is samadhi? It is a certain state of equanimity in which intellect goes beyond its normal function of discrimination. This, in turn, loosens one from one's physical body such that there is a space between you and your body. There are various types of samadhis, which for the sake of understanding have been classified into 8 types. Among these 8, there are 2 broad categories: savikalpa, samadhis with attributes or qualities that are very pleasant, blissful and ecstatic, and nirvikalpa, samadhis that are beyond pleasant and unpleasant, without attributes or qualities. In the case of nirvikalpa samadhi, there is only a single-pointed contact with the body. The rest of the energy is loose, uninvolved in the physical. These states are maintained for certain periods to help practitioners establish the distinction between themselves and their bodies. Samadhi is a significant step in one's spiritual evolution, but it is still not the ultimate. Experiencing a certain type of samadhi does not mean you are released from the cycles of existence. It is just a new level of experience. When you were a child, you experience life in a particular way. When you move into your adulthood, you have another level of experience. You experience the same things in a totally different way at different points in your life. Samadhis are just like this. Some people may go into a certain level of samadhi and stay there for years because it is enjoyable. In this condition, there is no space or time and no bodily problems because the physical and psychological barriers have been broken to some extent. But this is only temporary. The moment they come out of this state, all the bodily needs and mental habits return once again. Generally, compared to someone who is sober, someone who is slightly drunk has a different level of experience and exuberance, but everyone still has to come down at some point. All samadhis are a way of getting high without any external chemicals. If you go into these states, a new dimension does open up for you, but the crucial thing is that it does not leave you permanently transformed. You have not moved into another reality. Your level of experience has deepened, but you have not become free in an ultimate sense. Most enlightened beings never stayed in samadhi states. Gautama the Buddha never sat and meditated for years on end after his enlightenment. Many of his disciples went into very long meditations for years, but Gautama himself never did this because he must have seen it was not necessary for him. He practiced and experienced all the 8 kinds of samadhis before his enlightenment, and he discarded them. He said, "This is not it." He knew this was not going to take him to realization. Samadhi is just a heightened level of experience, a kind of inner LSD without external input, which causes altered levels of perception. The risk is that you could get caught up with it because it is far more beautiful than the current reality, but even the most beautiful experiences, as we know, can become a drag with time. If you have made realization the top priority in your life, then anything that does not take you one step closer towards your ultimate freedom is meaningless. Let us say you are climbing Mount Everest. You will not take one step sideways because every iota of energy is needed to reach the peak. Now, if you have to reach the peak of your consciousness, you need every iota of energy you can muster. And still it is not enough. Now, you would not want to perform any action that would distract you from the main purpose. What is this self-realization? You might wonder. After all that most people are looking for is health, well-being, wealth, love, and success. Do you really need self-realization? Let us look at this in the simplest possible way. Isn't it true that the more you know about your computer, the better you can use it? Isn't it true that your ability to use a device or an instrument is directly proportional to your knowledge about it? Isn't it true that someone with a high level of dexterity and expertise can use even a simple instrument in a seemingly magical way? Have you seen some people riding a piece of plastic that they call surfboard, doing incredible things? Just a piece of plastic, and what amazing feats of agility and grace they can perform. Similarly, the more profound your understanding of the human mechanism is, the more magical your life will be. In every culture, there have been a few people who performed certain actions that made others believe in miracles. All these actions that are known as miracles are just born of a more profound access to life that some have enjoyed. That access, as I have said time and again, is available to everyone who cares to look deeper. Tantra, a technology for transformation. Today, there are many practices associated with the occult sciences masquerading as spiritual processes. Let us say, I am in India and you are in America. I want to send you a flower, but I am not willing to take the journey that Columbus took. If I make this flower suddenly land in your lap, this is occult. There is nothing spiritual about it. It is just another way of handling the physical dimension of life. In India, we have many sophisticated occult processes. There are people who can just look at a photograph and make or break a person's life. They can ensure that the person contracts some ailment that the body could not customarily have acquired in such a short span of time. These occult practices can also create health, but unfortunately, many of them use their ability in other ways, as there seems to be a better market for these negative talents. In any case, whether it is employed for ill health or good health is beside the point. The use of occult toward any self-oriented goal is inadvisable. The yogic tradition is filled with stories of the great yogi Gorakhnath. Some say he lived in the 11th century, but there are many accounts that date him much earlier. He was a disciple of Matsyendranath, an illustrious yogi in his own right. Such was his level of attainment that Matsyendranath was often venerated as a reincarnation of Shiva or Adiyogi. The lore tells us that Matsyendranath lived for about 600 years. This need not be accepted literally or discarded as hagiography either. It essentially indicates an exceptionally long lifespan and tremendous awe with which this iconic figure was regarded. Gorakhnath became his disciple, and he adored and worshipped his master. Gorakhnath was all fire and intensity. Matsyendranath saw too much fire in him and not enough restraint. Fire burns through many things, so Gorakhnath started burning through the walls of ignorance, and suddenly he had enormous power. For most yogis and mystics, the problem has been that they could never share the fruits of their realization with people around them. To find another person capable of receiving what you know is not easy. If you find even one person, you are fortunate. So most spiritual masters downloaded their knowing in remote but not entirely inaccessible places. They often chose mountain peaks because there is less human traffic and disturbance in such places. There are many wonderful places like this in India. Mount Kailash, the mountain peak in western Tibet, that is regarded as a sacred place of immeasurable power and antiquity, is the place where maximum amount of knowledge has been stored for a very long time in energy form. Kailash is the greatest mystical library on the planet. Almost all the religions of the East hold it as highly sacred. Among Hindus, it is traditionally regarded as the abode of the great god Shiva and his consort Parvati. The Buddhists hold it holy because 3 of their great Buddhas are believed to be living there. The Jains believe their first great master, or Tirthankara, attained liberation there. The Bon religion, which is the original religion of Tibet, also considers it deeply sacred. I have been taking people to Kailash for the past 12 years. When I went there in 2007, my health was particularly bad. I had been travelling for weeks non-stop, during which baffled medics in different parts of the world had diagnosed me with a variety of illnesses including malaria, dengue, typhoid and even cancer. The confounded doctors termed my blood reports esoteric. Finally, I decided to look inward and work on myself. A few days later, I went to Kailash. I was better at this point, but still very weak. When I looked at the mountain, I saw there was so much mystical knowledge waiting to be accessed, so I took a strand of energy from the mountain and connected it with my energy system in a certain way. As soon as I did that, there was a sudden resurgence of vitality, and my depleted energy body, ravaged by nearly 8 weeks of fever, bounced back to normal. I looked younger, felt better, even my voice had changed, just in about an hour's time. The results were visible. There were almost 200 people around me who witnessed this. There are other places of enormous vibrational energy where mystics have bequeathed the fruits of their spiritual practice. Such spaces are innumerable in the Himalayas. A variety of mystics and yogis chose these mountains as their abode. When they lived there, they naturally left behind a certain dimension of energy. As a result, the Himalayas gathered a certain aura. For example, Kedarnath is just a small temple in the Himalayas. There is no deity there. It is just an outcrop of a rock. But it is one of the most powerful places in the world. If you strive to improve your receptivity and then visit a place like that, it will just blow you away. There are many places like that in the East, but the Himalayas attract the most people. There is another place called Kumar Parvat in southern Indian state of Karnataka. Parvat means mountain, Kumara refers to the son of Shiva, whose name was Kartikeya. He fought many battles, trying to transform the world, but when he realized the futility of this, he came to this region. It is here that he washed his sword of its blood for the last time. He decided that even if he fought for 1,000 years, he was never going to change the world, and that one violent solution would breed another 10 problems. So he climbed up the mountain and stood on the summit. Normally, when a yogi wants to shed his body, he will either sit or lie down, but because he was such a warrior, Kartikeya stood up and exited his body standing. If one can exit the physical form voluntarily without damaging it, that is an indication of absolute mastery over the life process. This is generally referred to in the Indian tradition as Mahasamadhi, a glorious equanimity. When I went to Kumar Parvat many years ago, a small tent was set up for me. I wanted to sleep in it, but when I went in and tried to lie down, my body would involuntarily move into a standing posture, dismantling the tent. The whole night I was not able to sit, my body would only stand. That is when I started seeing what Kartikeya's life was all about. Although he lived thousands of years ago, what he left behind is still vibrantly alive. This kind of work can never be wiped out. Whenever a person does something with his life energies, he creates a certain possibility, which cannot be erased by any event. The work and presence of anybody who experimented even a little bit with the inner dimensions can never be destroyed. For example, Gautama, the Buddha, is supposed to have lived 2500 years ago, and Jesus is supposed to have lived 2000 years ago. But, as far as I am concerned, both are a living reality. Once you create a certain volume of work with your life energies, it is permanent for all practical purposes, and time does not destroy it. If you work with the physical body of flesh and blood, it has a limited lifespan. If you use your mind, the lifespan of that work is much longer. But if you work with your fundamental life energies, then the result is timeless. The Silver Peaks. Ever since my infancy, there was always a certain mountain peak in the background of my gaze. Only when I was 16 years old and discussed this with my friends, who responded, "You're crazy, where are the mountains?" did I realize that nobody else had mountains in their eyes. For some time I thought I should locate that peak, but then I put the idea aside. Suppose there were a spot in your spectacles, you would get used to it after a while. It was just like that with my mountain peak. It was only much later, when a flood of memory returned to me, and when I was looking for a place to establish the Dhyana Linga, that I began to search for the peak that had dominated my vision. I travelled everywhere. I made the 760-mile ride from Goa to Kanyakumari on the southernmost tip of India about 11 times. Along every road and mud track, I have probably ridden thousands of miles. Then just by chance, one day, many years later, I came upon a village outside Coimbatore. As I was driving around a bend, I saw the seventh hill of the Velangiri mountains. There it was, the mountain that I had seen since my childhood. The moment I set my eyes upon that peak, one that had lived within me for my entire life, it vanished from my inner vision and became a living reality. Suddenly, I knew this would be the most conducive space for my life work. If you ask me which is the greatest mountain on the planet, I will always reply Velangiri. I was born with an imprint of these mountains in my eyes, and they have haunted me ever since. They lived within me and have been my very own navigating system, my inner radar. The mountains are not just a matter of geography for me, they are a reservoir of all that I needed to know to create the Dhyana Linga. The word Velangiri literally means silver mountain. This range is so named because the mountains are covered with cloud for a large part of the year. They are known as the Kailash of the south because Yogi or Shiva himself spent a little over 3 months upon these mountain peaks. When he came here, he was not in his usual blissful mood. According to the legend, he was angry with himself because he had failed to keep his word to one of his most ardent women devotees. He was intense and despondent, and that energy is still evident today. It produced a string of yogis through the tradition who are of the angry sort. They did their spiritual practice here and acquired that quality. They were not angry about anything in particular. They were simply in a certain state of intensity. The chakras are the 7 different dimensions through which our energies find expression. Experiences that happen within you, anger, misery, peace, joy and ecstasy, are different levels of expression of your life energies. If your life energies are dormant in Mooladhara, then food and sleep will be the most dominant factors in your life. If your energies are dominant in Swadhisthana, pleasure will be most dominant in your life. This means you enjoy the physical reality in many ways. If your energies are dominant in Manipuraka, you are a doer, you can accomplish many things in the world. If your energies are dominant in Anahata, you are a very creative person. If your energies are dominant in the Vishuddhi, you will develop a powerful presence. If your energies are dominant in Agna, then you are intellectually realized. Intellectual realization can bring you to a certain state of peace and stability within yourself, irrespective of what is happening outside of you. These are just different levels of intensity. A pleasure seeker has more intensity to his life than someone whose life is just food and sleep. A man who wants to initiate something in the world has much more intensity than a pleasure seeker. An artist or a creative person lives his life more intensely compared to these 3 people. If you move into Vishuddhi, it is a completely different dimension of intensity, and Agna is higher still. If you hit your Sahasrara, you will explode into unexplained ecstasies. Without any external stimuli or reason, you are simply ecstatic because your energies have touched a certain peak. It is misleading to speak of lower and higher chakras. It is like comparing the foundation of the building to the roof. The roof is not superior. The foundation is not inferior. The quality, lifespan, stability, and security of a building depends, to a large extent, more on the foundation than upon the roof. For example, in the physical body, your energies need to be in Mooladhara chakra to some extent. Moola means root or source, and Adhara means foundation. In the engineering of the body, this is the base. If you wish to grow, you need to cultivate this. At the same time, chakras have a spiritual dimension, not just a physical one. If you bring the right amount of awareness to it, the same Mooladhara can be transformed to a point where you become absolutely free of the compulsive need for food and sleep. The chakras fall into one of the 2 different dimensions. The Mooladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipuraka, and related chakras are more concerned with keeping the body stable and rooted. These are qualities associated with earth, with self-preservation. When your energies are dominant in these chakras, your qualities are earthy and you are more in the grip of nature. The upper chakras, the Vishuddhi, Agna, Sahasrara and related chakras are centers that draw you away from the pull of the earth. They are concerned with the longing for the infinite. They make you receptive to a force that we customarily refer to as grace. The middle chakra, Anahata, is a balance between the two. It is like a transition between your lower and upper chakras, between the survival instincts and the instinct toward liberation. It is symbolized by two interlocking triangles, one pointing downward and another upward, forming a six-pointed star. Many religious traditions have used the star as a sacred symbol because some enlightened beings in these cultures realized their original nature through Anahata and discovered the interlocking triangles of this chakra within themselves. The Vishuddhi chakra, located at the pit of your throat, literally means filter. If your Vishuddhi becomes powerful, you have the ability to filter everything that enters you. Or in other words, once your Vishuddhi is very active, you grow so powerful that the external nature has no influence over you. Indian iconography depicts Adi Yogi or Shiva with a blue throat because he is capable of filtering all the poisons of the outside world and preventing them from entering his system by stalling them in his throat. If your energies move into Agna Chakra, located between your eyebrows, you are intellectually enlightened, but still not experientially liberated. The great mystic philosopher of 8th century India, Adi Shankara, walked all across the land, defeating legions of scholars in metaphysical debate. His logic was unbeatable, because the union experienced in Agna endows one with an extraordinary level of intellectual insight and perception. The seventh chakra, Sahasrara, is actually located just outside the body. For most people, it is dormant. Through spiritual practice or a very intense way of living, you can activate this. If you hit your Sahasrara, your experience is no longer intellectual, it is experiential. You now explode into unexplained ecstasies, and the deepest mystical realms start opening up. Sometimes you can attain ecstasies that can turn uncontrollable if there is not sufficient spiritual practice to create necessary physiological and psychological balance. In the yogic tradition, these ecstatic mystics were termed avadutas. They were in such altered states of consciousness that they often had to be fed and taken care of by those around them because they were incapable of handling the worldly aspects of life on their own. Fundamentally, any spiritual path can be described as the journey from the Mooladhara to the Sahasrara, an evolution from one dimension to another. There is a wide spectrum of spiritual practices in the yogic system that enables one to move one's energies from one chakra to another. However, from the Agna to the Sahasrara, there is no path. You must either leap or fall into it. This is one of the reasons for tremendous emphasis on a living guru in the yogic tradition. To make the leap from Agna to the Sahasrara takes immense trust. Suppose you are confronted by a bottomless abyss and someone asks you to plunge into it. You would either have to be utterly crazy, extraordinarily courageous, or absolutely trusting to do it. Almost no one has the kind of courage it takes. Very few are mad enough to live their lives with total abandon. Most people live with caution and the overriding need to protect their boundaries. So for a 99.9% of the people, what is needed is trust. Without trust, they will never make the leap. However, the abbess need not conjure dark images of a terrifying pit. Instead, it signifies a space free of all possibility of hurt and suffering, an entirely new dimension that is flawlessly non-repetitive, a dimension beyond comparison, and context that leaves you not as an individual, but as all-encompassing infinite nature, in a stillness beyond bliss. And so, the leap is worth it. The leap is everything. With the leap, the bottomless abyss becomes boundless freedom. Sadhana. By focusing at a point 6 to 9 inches away from the region between your eyebrows for 12 to 48 minutes, with your eyes open, you can realize the nature and structure of your individual chakras, depending on the duration and level of your focus. This perception can help in stabilizing the random movement of chakras in the human physiology due to stressful external situations. This is just one aspect of a very sophisticated form of Kriya Yoga that allows you access to your inner Akashic or etheric dimension. The old-timer glanced at him with ill-disguised contempt. "I have been sitting here since morning, quietly, with not a single fish, and the fool thinks he can catch fish with music blaring at 4 in the afternoon. No fool like a young fool." To his amazement, within 10 minutes the boy landed a huge trout. The old man dismissed it as a lucky break and continued fishing. 10 minutes later, the boy caught one more big trout. Now the old man could ignore it no longer. He stared at the boy, dumbfounded, and just then, to his utter disbelief, the boy landed one more huge trout. The old-timer cast his pride aside and walked slowly over to the boy. "What is the secret?" he asked. "I have been sitting here the whole day, and my basket is empty. You already have 3 huge trout. What's going on?" The boy said, "Roo-ra-ra-ra, roo-ra-rum." The old man put his hand to his ear and asked, "What?" The boy turned down the stereo and said, "Roo-ra-ra-ra, roo-ra-rum." The old man was perplexed. "I don't understand a word you're saying." The boy spat a blob of something into his hand and said, "You have to keep the worms warm. Unless you do the right things, right things will not happen to you. Principles and philosophies are only of social consequence. It is time to wake up to yourself as an existential being, a living being, rather than a psychological case. Then your destiny will be your own, 100% your own. This is not an idle promise, this is a guarantee." No boundary, no burden. Once it happened, an argument arose one evening between a husband and wife. The argument was over the burning question, who should close the front door today? Not a simple question, and not a laughing matter. These are very serious issues in domestic situations. Who should close the door today? Who should switch off the garden lights this evening? Who should take the dog for a walk? These are questions that can drive couples to divorce. The argument grew more and more heated. The wife decided, "Every day it is I who, in the end, accepts defeat. Today, I am not going to give in." The husband also grew equally determined. "She pushes me around all the time. I am not going to give in to this woman today, no matter what." It was one of those grand rows. Now, every home has its own system of resolving these arguments. In this family, when confronted by an impasse, both husband and wife would sit silently. The person who uttered the first word would have to go and do the chore. The two sat in stony silence. Minutes ticked into hours. Dinner was on the table. If the husband said he wanted to eat, he would have to close the door. If the wife proposed dinner, she would have to close the door. Midnight. They were still sitting. A few rogues passing by on the street. They saw the doors of the house open, lights on, no party, nothing. Everything was quiet. They wanted to see what was going on, so they looked into the sitting room. They saw two people sitting there, steadfastly silent. The rogues looked at the silent couple. They were a little surprised. They decided to take a chance. They helped themselves to a few valuables in the sitting room. The two people said nothing. The rogues grew amused. Emboldened, they sat at the dining table, served themselves dinner. The couple sat heroically silent. The rogues were hugely tickled. What the hell was happening here? They grew bolder still. One of them kissed the wife. Still the couple didn't utter a word. The one who spoke would have to close the door. The stakes were too high. Neither could risk it. Now the rogues got a bit spooked. They decided it was time to leave this strange household, but before they left, they wanted to leave their mark. They decided to shave off the husband's moustache. One of them approached him, razor in hand. Then the husband finally spoke. He said, "Okay, damn it, I'll close that door." Perhaps the scenarios are different, but are there not situations in your life that hinge on a similar question, who is responsible? Who is responsible? It's a big question. Let's put the question more precisely. Who is responsible for the way you are right now? Your genes, your father, your mother, your wife, your husband, your teacher, your boss, your mother-in-law, God, the government, all of the above? The condition is a pervasive one. Ask someone, "Why are you in this situation?" Pat comes the response, "You know, when I was a child, my parents..." The same old story with just a few variations. There is an ancient science of how to create misery, and one in which human beings need no encouragement whatsoever. There is almost no one who is not an expert. Passing the buck is what you do in 100 different ways every day. You have collectively refined the old blame game into a fine art. The quality of our lives is determined by our ability to respond to the varied, complex situations that we encounter. If the ability to respond with intelligence, competence, and sensitivity is compromised by a compulsive or reactive approach, we are enslaved by the situation. It means we have allowed the nature of our life experience to be determined by our circumstances, not by us. Being fully responsible is to be fully conscious. What you consider to be your body is what you have gathered through ingestion. What you consider to be your mind is what you have gathered through 5 senses. What is beyond that, which you did not gather, is who you are. Being alive is being conscious. Everybody is conscious to some degree, but when you touch the dimension beyond body and beyond mind, you have touched that which is the very source of consciousness. You realize then that the entire universe is conscious. You inhabit a living cosmos. The physical and psychological dimensions belong to the realm of polarities, pain and pleasure, love, hate, masculine, feminine, and so on. If you have one, the other is bound to follow. But when you move into the fundamental dimension of who you are beyond all polarities. You now become blissful by your own nature. You are the master of your own destiny. It is time to reclaim for ourselves the extraordinary transformative power of this single word, responsibility. Apply it to your life and watch the magic unfold. Let us settle what we mean by the word at the start. Responsibility is a much misunderstood term. It has been used so widely and indiscriminately that it has lost much of its inner voltage. Responsibility does not mean taking on the burdens of the world. It does not mean accepting blame for things you have done or not done. It does not mean living in a state of perpetual guilt. Responsibility simply means your ability to respond. If you see I am responsible, you will have the ability to respond. If you think I am not responsible, you will not have the ability to respond. It is as simple as that. All it requires is for you to realize that you are responsible for all that you are and all that you are not, all that may happen to you and all that may not happen to you. This is not a mind game. This is not a self-help strategy for easy living. This is not a philosophical theory. This is a reality. The rub is that we are definitely not the most joyful, or the most loving, or the most peaceful. Why is this so? We have tried our best to fix the outside environment. If we fix it any more, there will be no planet left. But we are still no happier than our ancestors 1,000 years ago. If it is not working, isn't it time to look at what is wrong? How can we continue to do something that has not worked for 1,000 years? How much longer are we going to live with blueprints that clearly haven't delivered their promise? It's time for a paradigm shift. Let us start with a single question. What do we consider to be a state of well-being? Very simply, well-being is just a deep sense of pleasantness within. If your body feels pleasant, we call this health. If it becomes very pleasant, we call this pleasure. If your mind becomes pleasant, we call this peace. If it becomes very pleasant, we call this joy. If your emotions become pleasant, we call this love. If they become very pleasant, we call this compassion. If your life energies become pleasant, we call this bliss. If they become very pleasant, we call this ecstasy. This is all that you're seeking. Pleasantness within and pleasantness without. When pleasantness is within, it is termed peace, joy, happiness. When your surroundings become pleasant, it gets branded success. If you're not interested in any of this and want to go to heaven, what are you seeking? Just otherworldly success. So essentially, all human experience is only a question of pleasantness and unpleasantness in varying degrees. But how many times in your life have you lived an entire day blissfully without a single moment of anxiety, agitation, irritation, or stress? How many times have you lived in utter and absolute pleasantness for 24 hours? When was the last time it happened to you? The amazing thing is that for most people on this planet, not a single day has happened exactly the way they want it. Of course, there is no one who has not experienced joy, peace, even bliss, but it is always fleeting. They are unable to sustain it. They manage to get there, but it keeps collapsing. And nothing earth-shattering needs to happen for it to collapse. The simplest things throw people off balance, out of kilter. It is like this. You go out today and someone tells you that you are the most beautiful person in the world. You are floating on cloud 9. But then you come home and the folks at home tell you who you really are. Everything crashes. Sounds familiar? Why do you need to be pleasant within? The answer is self-evident. When you are in a pleasant inner state, you are naturally pleasant to everyone and everything around you. No scripture or philosophy is needed to instruct you to be good to others. It is a natural outcome when you're feeling good within yourself. Inner pleasantness is a surefire insurance for the making of a peaceful society and a joyful world. Besides, your success in the world depends essentially on how well you harness the prowess of the body and mind. So in order to achieve success, pleasantness has to be the fundamental quality within you. Above all, there is substantial medical and scientific evidence today that your body and mind function at their best when you are in a pleasant state. It is said that if you can remain blissful for 24 hours, your intellectual capabilities can be almost doubled. Just settling the internal muddle and allowing clarity to surface can achieve this. Now, the same life energy that you refer to as myself has sometimes been very happy, sometimes miserable, sometimes peaceful, sometimes in turmoil. The same life energy is capable of all those states. So, if you were given a choice about the kind of expression your life energy should find, what would you choose? Joy or misery? Pleasantness or unpleasantness? The answer is self-evident. The ways may vary from person to person, but whether you are trying to make money, hitting the bottle, or attempting to get to heaven, pleasantness is the only goal. Even if you say you are not interested in this world and your mission in life is only to get to heaven, you are still only searching for pleasantness. If people had told you since your childhood that God lives in heaven, but heaven is a horrendous place, would you want to go there? Definitely not. Essentially, the highest level of pleasantness is heaven, unpleasantness is hell. So some think it is in the wine, others think it is in the divine, but pleasantness is what everyone is seeking. The only thing that stands between you and your well-being is a simple fact. You have allowed your thoughts and emotions to take instructions from outside rather than the inside. On a certain day, a lady went to sleep. In her sleep, she had a dream. She saw a hunk of a man staring at her. Then he started coming closer, closer and closer. He was so close that she could even feel his breath. She trembled, not in fear. Then she asked, "What will you do to me?" The man said, "Well, lady, it's your dream." What is happening in your head is your dream. At least your dream should happen the way you want it, shouldn't it? Even if the world doesn't happen the way you want it, at least your thoughts and emotions should happen the way you want them to. Right now, these aren't taking instructions from you, because you are handling the whole human mechanism accidentally. The human mechanism is the most sophisticated physical form on the planet. You are the greatest piece of technology, but the problem is you don't know where the keyboard is. It is like you are handling a supercomputer with a pickaxe and a wrench. As a result, the simple life process is taking a toll upon humanity, just to earn a living, to reproduce, to raise a family, and then one day to fall dead. What a challenge! It is amazing how human beings struggle just to do what every worm, insect, bird, and animal does quite effortlessly. Put simply, our inner ecology is a mess. Somehow, we think that fixing outer conditions will make everything okay on the inside. But these past 150 years are proof that technology will only bring comfort and convenience to us, not well-being. We need to understand that unless we do the right things will not happen to us. This is true not just of the outside world, but also the inside. On a certain day, a bull and a pheasant were grazing on a field. The bull was grazing, and the pheasant was picking ticks off the bull. A perfect partnership. Looking at the huge tree at the edge of the field, The pheasant said, "Alas, there was a time I could fly to the topmost branch of the tree. Now I do not have enough strength in my wing even to get to the first branch." The bull said nonchalantly, "Just eat a little bit of my dung every day and watch what happens. Within 2 weeks, you will get to the top." Pheasant said, "Oh, come on, that's rubbish. What kind of nonsense is that?" The bull said, "Try it and see. The whole humanity is on it." Very hesitantly, the pheasant started pecking, and lo, on the very first day, he reached the first branch. Within a fortnight, he had reached the topmost branch. He sat there, just beginning to enjoy the scenery. The old farmer, rocking on his rocking chair, saw a fat old pheasant on top of the tree. He pulled out his shotgun and shot the bird off the tree. Moral of the story: bullshit may get you to the top, but it never lets you stay there. So you can bullshit yourself into all kinds of emotional states. You can somehow crank up some well-being for yourself, but the problem is it doesn't last. The weather could bring it down, the stock market could make it come crashing down, and even if it does not collapse, living in anticipation that it might is bad enough. The impending possibility that it will fall apart one day is torture, often worse than the actual disaster. So, as long as your inner life is enslaved to external situations, it will remain a precarious condition. There is no other way for it to be. The play of 5 elements. This is all it takes to make a throbbing, full-fledged human being. Maybe your desire is individual, maybe it is universal, but whether you want to realize the full potential of this human mechanism or merge with the larger cosmic mechanism, you need a certain measure of mastery over these 5 elements. Without this, you know neither the pleasure of being an individual nor the bliss of uniting with the cosmic. Whether your physical body is a stepping stone or a hurdle on your path to well-being essentially depends on how you are able to manage these 5. If they do not cooperate with each other, nothing significant ever happens to you. But with their cooperation, your life from the basic to the highest aspects suddenly becomes a tremendous possibility. The body is like a doorway. If you're always facing closed doors, then for you a door means a deterrent. If doors are always opening for you, then for you door means a possibility. They say how long a minute is essentially depends on which side of the bathroom door you are. Those inside say, "Just a minute, I'm coming." That 1 minute for the person outside is an eternity. Every spiritual practice in the world is related in some way with organizing these 5 elements. The most fundamental practice in the yogic system is bhuta shuddhi, the cleansing of the elements in the physical system, so that they work in harmony. All yogic practices are essentially derived from the cleansing of these elements. The basis of individual existence is actually memory, which penetrates deep into these 5 elements. Cleansing the elements of the compulsive tendencies that percolate into the individual as a result of mental, genetic, evolutionary and karmic memory helps bring a sense of absolute harmony between the individual and the cosmos. We will look at the role of memory at greater length in a later chapter. When you achieve a level of expertise in your yogic practice, you approach what is called as bhuta siddhi, a mastery over the elements. With this mastery, life opens up its bounty to you. Health, well-being, clarity, enlightenment, none of these can be denied to you anymore. So whether you experience life as a great possibility or a great barrier simply depends on the extent to which these 5 elements cooperate with you. Freedom and bondage, both are determined by these 5 elements. The very existence that traps you also sustains you. This is the paradox of life process. Love and hate, freedom and entrapment, life and death are all encapsulated in each other. If they were separate, there would be no problem. You could deal with them. The problem is they are inextricable. If you try to avoid life, you only end up avoiding death. In ancient India, there were courtesans who were masters in the art of seduction. They wore an elaborate jewelry that seemed impossible to remove. The whole body was covered in ornaments. If you had to take them off one by one, it would take a long time. The man fired up by lust would want to undress this woman, but it was in vain. She would go on encouraging with more intoxicants, a little more, and a little more. As his vision grew blurry, his task grew even more difficult, and eventually he would fall fast asleep, snoring. But there was just one pin. All it took was to pull this one pin, and everything would fall down. That trick only she knew. Life is a bit like that. It is a complex web, but there is one simple pin, and that is your identity. The play of 5 elements is highly evolved and complicated, but the key to freedom is your limited persona. If you pull the plug, it just falls apart and you're free. If you know how to pull yourself out, life's complexity collapses and everything settles. The simplicity of perfect alignment with existence is suddenly yours. Sadhana. The simplest thing that you can do to change the health and fundamental structure of your body is to treat the 5 elements with devotion and respect. While the Surya Namaskar is about balancing the 2 dimensions of sun and moon, or masculine and feminine, within the human system, the Surya Kriya is about connecting these 2 fundamental divisions for further spiritual growth. A legendary yogi, Raghavendra Rao, the yoga teacher I met as a boy, led a life that would be considered superhuman by conventional standards. He was known as Maladihalli Swami because he hailed from the village of Maladihalli, which is in the southern Indian state of Karnataka. He was known to do 1008 Surya Namaskars a day. Later, after he was 90 years of age, he brought the number down to 108, not because he was not capable, but because there was no time. That was his spiritual practice. In addition to being a yoga master, he was a wonderful Ayurvedic doctor. He was one of the few Nadi Vaidyas, traditional physicians, who diagnose your ailment by feeling your pulse. He would not only tell you what disease you had today, but could predict what ailment was likely to afflict you in the next 10 to 15 years, and would teach the requisite remedial practices. One day in a week, he would be available in his ashram as an Ayurvedic doctor. Wherever he was, he would travel back to the ashram on Sunday evening to be there on Monday morning. If he sat down at 4 o'clock in the morning, he was there right through the day till 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. Volunteers would come in shifts to help him, but he himself sat through the whole day. For every patient who came, he had a joke to tell. People would forget that they have come for treatment. It was less like a doctor-patient interaction and more of a festival. This happened when he was about 83 years of age. One Sunday, late at night, he was at a railway station about 46 miles from his ashram. He was with 2 companions and they discovered that there was a railway strike. This meant no trains and no other means of transport. His commitment to his work was such that he left his 2 companions on the platform of the train station and just ran 46 miles overnight on the railway tracks. At 4 o'clock in the morning, he was at the ashram, ready to treat his patients. People at the ashram did not even realize that he had come running. Only when his other two friends reached there did they tell the others what Swamiji had done. That is how incredibly he lived. He lived up to the age of 106 and taught yoga until his dying day. Elemental mischief. Life is a game of just 5 ingredients. Even a pizza requires more ingredients. But in yoga, both human body and the cosmos are based on the magic of only 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air and ether. Such a staggeringly complex phenomena, and just 5 variables. Not surprisingly, those who attain self-realization have often termed life a cosmic joke. Once when I was driving after midnight, I approached a mountain. As I drove towards it, I saw almost half the mountain was ablaze. I am not known to shy away from danger, so I continued to drive. But I was cautious because I knew I was in a car full of flammable fuel and I had my little girl in the back seat. It was misty, and the farther I drove up the mountain, the fire always seemed to be a little further away. Then I realized that although all the terrain that I saw from down below looked like it was on fire, as I drove into it, there was nothing at all. When I reached the actual site of the fire, I saw that a truck had broken down. The driver and a couple of others had built a small fire for themselves because of the cold. As the mist reached a dew point, the million droplets in the air, each one acting as a prism, created such a phenomenal illusion that a little fire seemed like a major conflagration. From down below, it looked like the whole mountain was aflame. That incident left me astounded. Creation is just like that, hugely magnified. Those who have looked within themselves closely, attentively, realized there was no need to look at the macro version. The entire cosmos is just a magnified projection of a little occurrence happening within you. Then there is the time-honored business of exporting human well-being to the heavens and claiming the core of the universe is love. Love is a human possibility. If you need a refresher course, you can take lessons from your dog. He is full of love. You don't have to go to outer space to know love. All these puerile philosophies come from the assumption that existence is human-centric. This single idea has robbed us of all sense and made us commit some of the most inhuman and heinous crimes throughout history. These continue to perpetuate themselves to this very day. As a guru, I have no doctrine to teach, no philosophy to impart, no belief to propagate. And this is because the only solution for all the ills that plague humanity is self-transformation. Self-transformation is not incremental self-improvement. Self-transformation is achieved not by morals or ethics or attitudinal or behavioral changes, but by experiencing the limitless nature of who we are. Self-transformation means nothing of the old remains. It is a dimensional shift in the way you perceive and experience life. Knowing this is yoga. One who embodies this is a yogi. One who guides you in this direction is a guru. My aim in this book is to help make joy your constant companion. To make that happen, this book offers you not a sermon, but a science, not a teaching, but a technology, not a precept, but a path. It is now time to start exploring that science, working the technology, walking the path. On this journey, the guru is not the destination, but the road map. The inner dimension is uncharted terrain. If you are exploring terrain that is unfamiliar to you, isn't it better to have signposts? You could find your own way, but who knows, it could take lifetimes. When you are on unfamiliar terrain, it is just sensible to take directions. On one level, that is all a guru is, a live roadmap, GPS, guru pathfinding system. And that is why there exists that infamous four-letter word. Just to make things doubly easy for you, I thought I would make it 8. Sadhguru. A note to the reader. There are many ways to approach a book of this kind. One way would be to plunge directly into practice, to take a headlong dive into do-it-yourself mode. But then this book does not claim to be a self-help manual. It has a strong practical orientation, but there is more to it than that. Another way would be to turn theoretical, but this book is not an exercise in scholarship either. I have never read any of the yogic treatises in their entirety. I never had to. I come from inner experience. It was only late in my life, when I skimmed through some of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, those significant yogic texts, that I realized that I had a certain access to their inner core. This is because I approached them experientially rather than theoretically. To reduce a sophisticated science like yoga to a mere doctrine is just as tragic as turning it into a cardiovascular workout. And so, this book has finally been divided into 2 sections. The first maps the terrain, the second offers you a way to navigate it. What you're about to read in this section is not a display of academic expertise. Instead, this section seeks to offer a series of fundamental insights that lay the foundation or bedrock on which the architecture of the more practice-oriented second section is built. These insights are not tenets or teachings, and they are most definitely not conclusions. They are best seen as signposts on a journey that can be made by no one but you. An intellectual understanding that is not backed by experience can lead to mind games and deceptive states. But if oneness becomes an experiential reality, it will not produce an immature action. It will produce a tremendous experience of life that will leave you transformed forever. Universality is not an idea. It is an existential truth. It is individuality that is an idea. Yoga is simply chitta vritti nirodha. That means, if the activity of your mind ceases and you are still alert, you are in yoga. But do not try to forcibly stop the mental activity, because you will go insane. With your mind, all the 3 pedals are throttles. There are no brakes and no clutch. Have you noticed this? Whatever pedal you hit, the mind only accelerates its speed. But if you don't pay any attention to it, thoughts will slowly subside, leaving you in a rich and vibrant silence. Sadhana. Remind yourself, at least once an hour, that everything you're carrying, your handbag, your money, your relationships, the heaviness in your heart and body, are things that you have accumulated over a period of time. If you become more and more conscious of this fundamental fact, even as a process of disidentification grows within you, balanced by a deep sense of involvement in everything around you, you will move from the misery and madness of the human mind towards meditativeness. Thinking yourself out of life. It is only because you exist that you can generate a thought, but your thought process has become so compulsive that your focus has shifted from the existential to the psychological. This has happened to such an extent that you have begun to believe that you exist because you think. The foundations of Western philosophy actually rest on the famous axiom by the 17th century French philosopher René Descartes, "I think, therefore I am." It is time to restate a fundamental fact: you are, therefore you may think. This has nothing to do with any philosophy, Eastern or Western. It is a simple existential reality. You can be and still choose to think or not think. The most beautiful moments in your life, what you might consider moments of bliss, joy, ecstasy, or utter peace, were moments when you were not thinking about anything at all. You were just being. Even without your thoughts, existence is. What are thoughts really? Just information that you have gathered and recycled. Are you really capable of thinking of anything other than what has been accumulated by your mind? All human mind is doing is recycling old data. So I ask, do you want to be a living being or a thinking being? Right now, 90% of the time you're only thinking about life, not living it. Have you come into this world to experience life or to think about it? Your mental process is a very small happening compared to the life process, but right now it has become far more important. It is time for humanity to shift the significance to the life process once again. The need is an urgent one. Our lives depend on it. Once it happened. This is almost an apocryphal tale, but that doesn't matter, it smells true. Aristotle, the father of modern logic, the intellectual giant of ancient Greece, was walking on the beach. A glorious sunset before him, but he had no time for such petty occurrences. He was thinking seriously about some great problem of existence. For the intellectual mind, existence is always a problem, and Aristotle was out to solve it. Lost in solemn thought, he paced up and down the beach. There was another man on the beach who was doing something very intensely, so intensely that after a while even Aristotle noticed him. Those who are immersed in their own psychological realities usually end up ignoring life around them. They seldom have the eyes to look at a flower, a sunset, a child, or a smiling face. And if it is an unsmiling face, they have no inclination to make it smile. They have no such small duties or minor cares in the world. They are too busy cracking the great puzzles of existence. But this man's intensity was such that even Aristotle could not ignore him. On close observation, he noticed that this man kept going to the ocean, returning with great single-mindedness of purpose. Aristotle paused in his reflections to inquire, "What exactly are you up to?" The man said, "Please don't disturb me. I am doing something very important." He continued with his work with furious intensity. Aristotle's curiosity was piqued. He asked again, "But what are you doing?" The man said, "Don't disturb me, it's very important." Aristotle said, "What is this important thing?" The man showed him a little hole he had dug in the sand, and said, "I am emptying the ocean into this hole." He had a tablespoon in his hand. Aristotle looked at this and laughed. Now Aristotle is the kind who can spend a whole year without a single chuckle. It takes a heart to laugh. The intellect cannot laugh. it can only dissect. But even Aristotle laughed at this and said, "This is ridiculous. You must be insane. Do you know how vast this ocean is? How can you ever empty this ocean into this little hole, and above all with a tablespoon? At least if you had a bucket, you might have stood some chance. Please give this up. This is utter madness." The man looked at Aristotle, threw the spoon down and said, "My job is already done." Aristotle said, "What do you mean? Forget about the ocean being empty. Even the hole is not full. How is your job done?" The other man stood up and said, "I am trying to empty the ocean into this little hole with a tablespoon. You are telling me it is madness, but what are you trying to do? Do you know how vast this existence is? It can contain 1,000,000,000 oceans like this and more, and you are trying to empty it into the small hole of your head. And with what? With tablespoons called thoughts. Please give it up. It is utterly ridiculous." The other man was Heraclitus, the great Greek philosopher. In a flash he showed Aristotle what a crippled existence he was leading by attempting to extend his logic to every aspect of life. If you want to know the experiential dimensions of life, you will never know them with a petty process of thought. Even if you have a brain of an Einstein, your thought process is still outclassed, because thought cannot be bigger than life. Thought can only be a logical functioning between two polarities. If you want to know life in its immensity, you need something more than the intellect. This is the fundamental choice you have. Either you learn to live with creation, or you manufacture your own creation in your head. Which option do you want to exercise? The planet is spinning on time, not a small event. All the galaxies are managing fine, the whole cosmos is doing great, but you have one nasty little thought crawling in your head, and it is a bad day. The problem is, you are living in a psychological space that bears no connection with reality, and you are insecure because it can collapse any moment. In the vastness and grandeur of cosmic space, if you look at yourself in perspective, you are less than a speck of dust, but you think your thought, which is less than a speck within you, should determine the nature of existence. You have lost your perspective of life. That is the basic problem. You have heard of the Buddha. His name was Siddhartha Gautama, and he became a Buddha. But Gautama was not the only Buddha. A human being who has transcended his intellect, the discriminatory and logical functions of his life, is a Buddha. Human beings have invented millions of ways to suffer. For all this, the manufacturing unit is just in your mind. Once you are no longer identified with your mind, you are free to experience life beyond limitations. Being a Buddha means that you have become a witness to your own intellect. The essence of yoga, as we have said before, is just this: to arrive at that moment where there is clear space between you and your mind. Once this happens, a life of heightened clarity, perception, and freedom has begun. This is the birth of freedom. Limits of logic. Without logical thinking, you couldn't survive on this planet. But at the same time, too much logic is suicide. Let us say you wake up tomorrow morning and start thinking 100% logically. Do not think about the sunrise, the birds in the sky, your child's face, the flowers blooming in your garden. Just think logically. Now you have to get up, go to the toilet, brush your teeth, eat, work, sleep. Again tomorrow morning, the same thing. For the next 30, 40 or 50 years, you have to do the same thing. If you think 100% logically, There is no reason for you to be alive. One day in New York City, a man was walking home late from work. Suddenly he had a romantic idea. He went to the florist, bought a huge bunch of red roses, went home and knocked on the door. His wife opened the door. She looked at him and started hollering, "Today has been a terrible day. The faucet has been leaking, the basement is flooded, the children had a food fight, and I had to clean the whole place, the dog has been sick." Once it happened, a gentleman carrying an infant was travelling from London to Bristol on a train. Another gentleman entered the compartment, dumped his 2 huge suitcases and sat beside the first. The gentleman waited very politely for an appropriate amount of time. Then he turned to the second passenger and said, "Looking at your suitcases, I presume you are a salesperson. I am also one." The gentleman said, "Yes, I am a salesperson." Another genteel pause. Then the first passenger asked, "What do you sell?" The other replied, "I sell helical gears." Another decorous silence. Then he asked the first gentleman, "And what do you sell?" He said, "I sell condoms." Shocked, the second gentleman said, "You sell condoms, and you're taking your son with you on your business. Is that appropriate?" "This is not my son," replied the first passenger. "It is a complaint from Bristol." Human beings are in a perennial state of complaint. They carry their complaints with them like a badge of their identity. There are many who live their lives lamenting that life has been particularly unfair to them. They cite instances of all the terrible things that have befallen them, the chances they never got, the many injustices they have suffered. Maybe it is even true. What most people forget is, the past exists within each one of us only as memory. Memory has no objective existence. It is not existential, it is purely psychological. If you retain your ability to respond, your memory of the past will become an empowering process. But if you are in a compulsive cycle of reactivity, memory distorts your perception of the present, and your thoughts, emotions, and actions become disproportionate to the reality in which you exist. The choice is always before you to respond consciously to the present or to react compulsively to it. There is a vast difference between the two, and it can make the world of a difference. If terrible things have happened to you, you ought to have grown wise. If the worst possible events have befallen you, you should be the wisest of the lot. But instead of growing wise, most people become wounded. In a state of conscious response, it is possible to use every life situation, however ugly, as an opportunity for growth. But if you habitually think, "I am the way I am because of someone else," you are using life situations merely as an opportunity for self-destruction and stagnation. I once heard a moving account of a woman who used one of the most horrific life situations to transform herself into a beautiful being. In the beginning of World War II, a bunch of Nazi soldiers broke into a house in Austria. They took the adults away separately, and the 2 children, a 13-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy, were taken to a railway station. As they waited along with other children for the train to arrive, the boys started a game. Oblivious to what lay in store, they started playing as children are wont to do. A cargo train arrived, and the soldiers started packing everyone into it. Once they were in, the girl noticed that her brother had forgotten to bring his shoes. It was an Austrian winter, a bitter one. Without shoes, you could lose your feet. The girl lost her temper. She shook the little kid brother. boxed his ears and abused him. "You idiot, don't we have enough trouble on our hands? We don't know where our parents are. We don't know where we are going. And now you go and lose your shoes. What am I supposed to do with you?" In the next station, the boys and girls were separated, and that was the last that the brother and the sister ever saw of each other. About 3.5 years later, the girl came out of the concentration camp. She discovered she was the only one alive in her family. Everyone else had vanished, including her brother. All that remained was the memory of the harsh words she had uttered the last time she had seen him alive. That was when she made a life-changing decision. It doesn't matter who I meet. I will never speak to them in a manner that I regret later, because this meeting could be my last. She could have spent her life in defeat and remorse, but she made this simple decision which transformed her life phenomenally. She went on to live a rich and fulfilled life.